What's going on, everyone? So, Stu Macher. A lot of people want Stu Macher to return to the Scream franchise. I know many of you, not all of you watching this video, are very aware. I am not one of those people. I do not want Stu to return. I just think we should leave the past in the past, move on, develop new characters, develop new Ghostface, right? Create new characters, and something else that I've talked about with Stu Macher, right? Everybody has an idea of what Stu is going to be in their heads. And more often than not, they're not going to be happy. They're going to get what they wanted, but they're not going to get it in the way that they wanted. Because again, there's no way Stu Macher is the same character that you expect. And some of you might be thinking, I don't expect them to be, but you still have a certain expectation of what you want him to be, to look like, to sound like, to act like, everything, right? And you're also trusting that the writer can go and create and establish and tell a story of Stu Macher and build up a proper character that ties in now while telling the story and filling in the last 30 plus years in a proper manner when they couldn't even do it with Sidney and Gail. And now you're asking them to basically tell backstory over 30 years when Sidney and Gail were just plug and play, right? Like I don't trust the writer, and I know Kevin Williamson's back, but he's not the writer. He's the director. Yes, he had some input, I'm sure, in this script and in this story, but it's not the same thing as writing the entire script and story, right? Like, how much is he going to change of the script to where it gets to the point where it's like, okay, well, then you just write it then, right? Like, that didn't happen. So my problem is I just don't think the juice is going to be worth the squeeze in the end. I think you're going to have a lot of disappointed people, but I know a lot of people want it back, including my buddy Craven Something Scary. Rest in peace, Craven. Can't talk Stu without mentioning him. I know a lot of people really want me on the Stu train since his passing, but like I've said, Craven wouldn't want me to. He always wanted me on the Stu train, without a doubt. I mean, he would text me and call me and be like, one day, but he wouldn't want me to just jump on the Stu train just because of his passing, right? He wanted me to fully commit and buy in, right? And I'm sure if Stu returns, I'm going to probably get some dreams. I'm sure Craven's going to reach out and be like, hey, I told you. But nonetheless, right? How does Stu work? How can you make Stu work, right? Because that's the thing. Is it possible to make Stu Macher work in the Scream franchise? Again, sure, anything is good writing, good execution, good delivery. I don't want it to happen, but it doesn't matter what I want. It matters what the studio and the writers and everybody, what they want, right? Like, at the end of the day, if they want to go that route with the fan service and all that stuff, and I do think if you were ever going to do it, now's the time, right? Because you're jumping right into a new, likely Scream Sidney trilogy with Scream 7 and then Scream 8 already greenlit. It just, if you were ever going to do it, now's the time to do it. Again, how do you do it though? I do not believe you can do it in one film. I don't, right? So I want to explain and break down how I think you can make this work, how I think you can make this happen in a reasonable manner, because we know Scream 8 exists. If they try to bring Stu back all in one film, I never say never, but I think that there's almost a zero shot that it actually works at all. Because again, you have like 20 characters in this film. You need to develop Sidney Prescott, Gail Weathers, the Meeks twins, Tatum, who's Sidney's daughter, her family dynamic, tell the story of Ghostface, tell the story that is going to be overarching or whatever with all the various characters, develop characters, which they haven't done a great job with regardless. And, oh yeah, by the way, now explain Stu Macher, everything with Stu Macher, where he's been the last 30 years, plus now have him be the Ghostface mastermind at the end. I just don't think it makes any sense. I really believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe Scream 7 and 8 are going to be just kind of one story. I do. I think 7 is going to be the setup and establishment. They announced 7 and 8, or not announced 8, but we know that it got greenlit at basically the same time. So and there were rumors that the moment Scream 7 was announced that there was going to be a trilogy, but the only one that got greenlit immediately was Scream 8. I don't think they greenlit two movies essentially at the same time to not have them be the same kind of continued story. So how does Stu work in this vision? I don't believe you can do it in one film. What I think the best course of action for them to do is you set up and establish Stu in this film. You lay the breadcrumbs, you explain the story throughout the course of the film. You make the audience believe that it actually is indeed Stu Macher that's alive, and you tell again, explain where he's been, how he's been, why after all this time. You have so much you need to get through, you have so much that you need to digest, right? That you need to explain. I think what you do is you do all that throughout the course of the film, but he's not an actual character in the film. You just kind of see him in AI and all that stuff, blah, 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 right? However they want to inject him in the film. But he's not an actual flesh and blood character that we see in the actual movie, right? Then at the end, I think you have the audience's expectation of Stu's alive, he's about to pull off the mask, and that's going to be the big reveal. And instead, it's his sister, Leslie, which is already an established character that we don't know, we're not familiar with, that ties in directly to Stu. So you can let all the breadcrumbs of Stu Macher, where he's been, established that he's alive somewhere, and it be the sister. So we think in the end, oh, it was just a big ruse. It was really the sister all along. That's unfortunate. It wasn't Stu, but you got all the details. Remember all the details throughout the film, right? And now you get to the end. They take out Leslie Macher. Leslie Macher meets her in. And then at the very end, you get the cliffhanger, which is Stu Macher really alive. Ghostface mask comes off or something, and boom. Now you have, but you've already told the entire backstory. You've already told and explained everything you need to explain, everything you need to get across, all the points, everything. Everything is basically neatly wrapped into a bow at that point. You didn't have to rush it because you were able to pace it as the Ghostface arcing story, right? Because if you do it with Stu being the mastermind at the end, right? Now, yes, you were able to lay out the story throughout the course of the film, but you can't have Stu in the actual movie until the very end. So then you're just going to get Stu for like 5 minutes. He's going to die, and then that's it. Where if you do it this way, now you have the overarching story. You explain Stu Macher and how he can be reintroduced. We as an audience think Stu's back. You get the Ghostface reveal. The people that wanted Stu back are all disappointed and upset because it wasn't Stu Macher, it was really Leslie Macher. But in the end, they get all excited again, and it's a roller coaster of emotions because Stu Macher is really alive, and he just watched his sister dead. Maybe he's standing over his sister's body or something like that. And then now you have that, the screen go black, and boom, Stu Macher's alive. And Leslie Macher's dead. And now you got extra motivation from Stu because Sidney just killed his sister, right? Like, that is something that I think could make sense. It would tie in. You could create the story. You could overarch what you want to overarch and get across. You could tie it into a cult or whatever you want to do to where we think Leslie Macher is the cult leader, but really it's not her, it's Stu. But you can use Leslie Macher as the kind of Stu crutch that you need in order to build up what you want. Now, I have images of Anna Camp that are probably showing on screen, just because, again, we don't know. Like, one, there's a lot of people that think Anna Camp is going to be Leslie Macher, which is very possible. It's a very real possibility. But two, right, she's the only character that we know that kind of fits the profile of what we assume Leslie Macher looks like. So, I'm not necessarily saying Anna Camp exactly will be Leslie Macher. I also think that that's hard to justify and explain because wouldn't Sidney recognize Leslie Macher? Even if she was already grown up, she had to have met her on occasion, right? Like, it's a small town of Woodsboro. Like, it'd make more sense if Anna Camp was like much younger than Sidney and, she was like a baby or something. But Anna Camp's supposed to be around the same age as Sidney, so I don't think that works. But we'll see. Time will tell. I'm just, again, kind of using that for visual elements. So, nonetheless, point is, use Leslie Macher as the crutch, as I mentioned, to explain Stu Macher and his backstory, to tie in everything that you need to tie in without ruining Stu Macher and him just kind of being a small blimp in the overall of the film. And then that way in Scream 8, you can get a much more heavy dose of Stu Macher because the characters don't know Stu's really alive. The characters just think it was Leslie Macher and it was just all part of her plan. But really, Stu is alive. We as the audience know Stu Macher is alive. And thus, they can actually incorporate him and use him much more. You can have scenes with him not in the Ghostface costume, right? If you establish the cult part and say Stu's the leader of that cult, you can have him without costume, without a robe, and it doesn't ruin anything for the audience, right? Because you can have the audience is clued in, but the characters aren't. So we're privy, but the characters aren't privy. And so you can now have Stu be a main character throughout Scream 8 and satisfy the excitement for the fans that actually want him to return. And it also gives you an opportunity to develop and build Stu Macher as a character over the course of Scream 8 rather than rushing it and trying to fill him in, at the last minute. So that is how I believe they should incorporate and inject Stu Macher personally. Right? If you have other ideas, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. Because as always, this is a discussion. So I pass the question to you. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out. So we enjoy these types of videos and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one.